Well, let me introduce Professor Wendy Brown. Political theorist, public intellectual, Professor Wendy Brown is one of the most influential thinkers of democracy and political power in the contemporary world. Her scholarship has reshaped global debates about the future of democratic governance, economic inequality, and the meaning of citizenship. Her books, translated into more than 20 languages, are widely studied for their depth, their originality, and their capacity to illuminate the forces that are reshaping modern political life. Wendy Brown is joining us from Europe. Please make her welcome.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be among you, to be with a projected democratic rule, and to follow these extraordinary performances and talks. My own contribution today outlines political coordinates for a nationalist, brilliant, and inspiring account of the world that we have to make. I'm going to argue that the global crisis of liberal democracy and the planet calls for a new political form, one in which democracy is forced from liberalism. The right is already developing its own version of liberalism, and my argument is that the left must rival this with a version of liberal democracy that is inclusive, emancipatory, and ecologically regenerative. Liberal democracy is in crisis today, not only because it's being attacked, but because it's historically exhausted. Indeed, it's under attack because it's exhausted, challenged by both populism as certainty rather than liberal democratic institutions and practices have been defended and battered by unprecedented powers of capital and digital technologies, by routine political and economic corruption, and by disinformation and media practices that undermine reliable mass information and ordinary political accountability. Above all, liberal democracy offers to the fore the most significant global forces, from rogue financing to rogue state, and it offers to one of the most serious global challenges, from decarbonization, immigration, resource wars, to humanitarian catastrophes. But the crisis calling for a new political form exceeds those of liberal democracy itself. There's also, of course, the ecological crisis. No longer a crisis, but an emergency, as multiple tipping points are breached: climate change, extinction, production of waste, toxicities to land, water, and air, and massive change at the site of deforestation, topsoil erosion, overfishing, and declining underground aquifers. Then there's the crisis of massive poverty and devaccine. Inequality is too small a word for this. Neoliberalization and financialization have brought on tiny fraction towards the wealth of young and hungry rich, while a growing quantity of livelihoods faces nutrition, potable water, shelter, access to education and healthcare, including in the richest nations on earth. But why focus on liberal democracy and not capitalism, as what these three crises call to transform? Of course, capitalism is important, but still also is the governing facilitating and legitimating, strictly fair and beneficial, a form now so situated by capital, that liberal democracy is not contained and controlled. Moreover, we need alternative economic arrangements that is evidently alternative political, social, and moral successes. Well, why not democracy? It's not democracy that's in crisis. Surging populisms across the political spectrum testify isolating us ontologically and practically from them. Disavowing the deep interdependence of lives, liberalism advances the corporatization and privatization of everything. It is wary of a legislative conclusion. Liberalism as a framework of democracy is in part too loose, too fair, which permits it to harbor deep stratifications, inequalities, and history amidst its abstract promises of universalism and egalitarianism. Liberalism's guidelines for human conduct are planted too far apart to produce the substantive inclusion, equality, and freedom that democracy requires, and the care for a movement that must be the bedrock of any political framework for a habitable future. In its intentional doctrinal experience and its dispersion of subjects, its intentional hoarding, collective understanding and action, liberalism is vulnerable to concentrated uninformed and manipulation of principles for egregious, undemocratic, and climate-destroying purposes. If liberalism is too thin a curriculum to support democracy or ecological regeneration, it's also too thickly entwined with capitalism and humanism, its fellow triplets in utero in maternity. Liberalism's task program as foundational to an element union, which animates parceling and colonizing, exploiting work life, both human and animal. Liberalism's position of right-bearing individual against society and is entitled to one of the commons. It equates rights with freedom, even as political freedom. The activity of ruling ourselves together can't be derived from rights that secure individuals against each other and the state. The too muchness and the too littleness of liberalism are related above all in the fact that liberalism, despite pertaining to both economics and politics, sharply separates these two spheres from one another. The boundary that liberalism flags between the political and the economic makes democracy modified by the term liberal an exclusively political project and arena. This grasps the de-democratizing effects of capital. It allows liberal orders to harbor disparately distributed wealth, privileges, and opportunities of every kind without violating liberal principles. Of course, the liberal distinction between the economic and the political was perversely repressed by Neoliberalism, which treats all social life, including state, as appropriately organized by economic. That is, neoliberalism restructures the political and the economic by reducing everything to economic liberalism. This reduction converted to the equal right in an order of winners and losers. It reduced liberty to the right to buy, sell, exploit, and pillage, and do and say anything, no matter how furious or anti-Semitic. Fraternity past democracy is an exclusively political arrangement, and instead, democracies organize conflicts, essentially a equality across all human existence. But how to place political ecology and democracy's time? How to incorporate into the rule of the demos, the non-human life with which we are imitating, but have long treated as radically outside, as ours to use, but not to care. A robust political ecology casts every political, economic, conundrum, and decision as equal privilege. And it casts every ecological predicament as produced, mitigated, or solved by political, economic decisions and practices. More than a policy framework, political ecology must shape democratic citizenship, discourse, law, institutions. In place of nature and other and species, democratic substances must be steeped in their interdependence with nature and responsibility for sustaining the conditions of regeneration. Thus, political ecology displaces the centrality of interest and property to center conditions of regenesis for multiple life forms, including, but not limited to, our own. Finally, in addition to political economy and political ecology, post-liberal democracies not to our time must have a reparative orientation. The progressivism which liberalism is saturated was literally powered by fossil fuels, whose residual down endure and constrict every possible future. These residuals do not melt in me, but only are forever. As nanoplastics are now suspended in every water iron, as forever chemicals are resident in our soils, bodies, and rivers, and as the colonial particles of the book, too, features in human stratifications and political definitions. We require a political and juridical framework that critically apprehends and addresses this construction of the parent and constriction of the faith, a framework we call parenting. Liberalism fails us. It's not only that it's dedicated on progressive and bound to limitless energy production, consumption, and growth, it also disembeds rights-bearing subjects from clinics of life, enjoying us only to pursue our own individual power and prosperity, to look to politics only to satisfy what we want right now. A reparative democracy breaks with liberalism's insistent shrugging off of the past, its centering of it needs and appetites, its giddy glide, open future. It refuses a hard principle that pertains only to individual actions or harm to other humans. It faces squarely the finitude and the delicacy of nature. In short, it formulates democracy in ways required by the anthropocene and by the history of liberal exclusion and violences, especially the phenomenon of those animated colonialism, racism, patriarchy. Opposed to comparative democracy replaces worldviews in which humans are the sole subjects and objects of politics, economic methods, and in which we can simply get behind one another. It also requires fundamental separation of liberal democracy. Separation between humans and nature, between politics and economics, and between politics and ecology. In short, a post-liberal democratic vision with political economy, political ecology, and comparative orientation shares certain issues with the post-liberal, including association and connection and basic patterns and separation, and concern for determination and common good. But unlike post-liberalism, reparative democracy is emancipatory diverse and active citizen, rather than one blind by hierarchy, authority, homogeneity, privatism, and traditionalism. The differences are sharp, but I emphasize what they share because of the recruitment possibility that what they share opens. Let us begin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wendy. An invitation to a very deep reflection. It's something that the interconnectedness of the situation we have to understand and plan for in the future. Political economy, political ecology, and beyond that. It's something I'm looking forward to hearing again because it has so many insights and so much depth. Thank you.